what is really different about trafficking here in the States that I think a lot of people don't understand. I think when people think about trafficking in the States, they think about kidnapping or, stranger danger or something like that. But what we see more frequently here, actually, the top 2 trafficker types in the United States are family and intimate partners or boyfriends or spouses. It's not a stranger. It's someone that you know, that you think that you can trust or that you think that you love. Actually, our partner in West Virginia, Zara House, the biggest problem that they're experiencing there are families selling their children for drug money.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Naked Gospel. I am your host, Shane O'Neill. Today we are joined by Emily Worsham. Emily has decided to join me in the studio, which is super nice because we've been doing everything remotely. So it is cool just to have somebody here. She's going to walk us through her experience with sex trafficking. She works with a ministry that combats sex trafficking. And as we look at a lot of porn culture and hookup culture, a lot of just the culture that's ubiquitous here in the West, for me, I want to know what kind of impact it has, what it's doing to people. It can seem like such an innocuous thing, something that doesn't have repercussions, doesn't impact lives. It's something we do in secret, and so we just assume it stays in secret. And so Emily's just going to walk us through some stories and some experiences that'll help shed light on that. I'm really looking forward to it because this is good for my heart, and it's good for me to know what's going on. So, Emily, thanks for being here.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Emily, would you take a minute just to share with those who are listening in who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I am the office manager at Freedom 424. So like you said, we are an anti-human trafficking nonprofit. Our mission is to bring freedom and justice to victims and survivors of sexual exploitation and trafficking. And so my work with the organization is largely administrative. I manage our intern and volunteer program. When we're not in a global pandemic, I plan all of our international outreach trips and get to lead some of them. And yeah, donor communication, any sort of administrative-based task I help do.
That's awesome. That's a really unique set of skills and gifts.
Yeah.
Kind of jack of all trades at that level.
I am. Yeah.
I remember, this is tangential, but I remember I was sharing once for Proven Ministries, and I was letting a group of people know what we did, and I was so nervous. And I was like, yeah, we talk about pornography, and we help create like awareness and just like put forward sex trafficking. And I said that, and like I did like my whole spiel, and somebody came up to me afterwards, and they're like, "You mean anti-sex trafficking, right?" And I was like, "Oh God, what have I done?" I just made it sound like our ministry like propagates like sex trafficking. So hopefully that's never happened to you.
Yeah, no, it has that.
Yes, good. It's nice to know that I'm the only fool. You have been to Thailand a few times. You were saying you've been there 3 times now. Thailand's often seen as kind of like a sex trafficking hub of the world. I know there are a couple red light districts in the world, but even for those who might not know that or what a red light district is, would you mind just walking us through what that is?
Yeah, so red light districts are in countries all across the world, but specifically in Thailand, I have visited both Bangkok and Pattaya. So everyone knows Bangkok, Thailand. Pattaya is a much smaller city. It's about 2.5 hours southeast of Bangkok. And so anyway, a red light district in Thailand looks largely like a strip of clubs or bars, show bars, things like that, where girls will be lined up outside. Many will be inside as well, doing different sexual shows and things like that, dancing on a stripper pole, all sorts of different things. But you're right. A lot of people, when they think of sex trafficking, immediately think of Thailand or Cambodia, places like that. But what's really interesting, sad but interesting, Pattaya, which is where I spent most of my time last year when I was in Thailand. It's like I said, a really small town. It's about 8.6 square miles. And in high season, there's easily 50,000 women for sale just within those 8.6 square miles. So to put that into a little bit of perspective.
Would you say that number one more time?
50,000 women.
Okay.
So the city of Lynchburg is just under 50 square miles, and Pattaya is 8.6. 50,000 women for sale at 1,000 bars. Packed in this one tiny location. So Pattaya is self-proclaimed as the sex capital of the world. It's easily the darkest place that I've ever gone to and experienced in my life. I don't know what else you want me to say to that.
No, that's helpful. That is helpful. It's a really, unfortunately, clear look at a really awful thing. So Thailand, so is this stuff like legal there? Is this like supported by the government, or the government doesn't care?
Yeah, so prostitution is actually illegal in Thailand. And the way that a lot of the bars and when I say bar, it's not like a restaurant like we have here in the United States. They do serve drinks and alcohol, usually don't serve food. But in Thailand, when I say bar, I mean like a place where you can go and yes, buy a drink, but also buy a human being. So prostitution is illegal in Thailand, but a lot of these places get around that because the business itself is not participating in the transaction of that person. So like say you go into a bar in Thailand and you see this Thai girl that you want to take home with you for the night. You're not going to make that transaction with the bar owner or the bar manager. You're going to make that transaction with the girl. And so that means that business can't be prosecuted for the crime of prostitution. The girl can. Wow. But a lot of these women and girls end up in these bars in Bangkok and Pattaya and Phuket and all these other places in Thailand because they have no other option. They're not educated. They're extremely poor. And poverty in Thailand is not at all like poverty here in the States. We have welfare here. We have healthcare. We have, subsidized housing, different government assistance programs. In Thailand, none of that exists. So if you don't make money, you can't feed your family. If you aren't educated, you can't get a job. So all of these things, kind of compound, and they're left feeling like they have no other option but to go to Bangkok, to go to Pattaya and work in a bar and sell themselves. And
when something is normalized culturally, even if it's at a societal level illegal, it still then presents itself as an option, and presumably there's probably some sort of remuneration when it comes to money and things like that. And so the selling of body probably seems quite normal to kind of the residents of that country, unfortunately.
Yeah, that actually brings up a really interesting point. In Thailand, you'll also see this happen in like India and other places in Southeast Asia. But in Thailand, there's a thing called generational prostitution. And so, for example, my mother goes to Bangkok, works in a bar, selling herself. She has me. I'm born into that generational cycle of working in the bars. I saw my mom do it. So therefore I think that I have to, or that I have no other option. Yep. That's all I know. And it just becomes normal and acceptable.
Emily, just so we can peer through your eyes a little bit better, because you've laid that out so well, would you mind I don't know, taking us like a walk down one of these streets and some of the things you would see, but also some of the things you have seen, so that we can inhabit that story a little bit better, because there's such distance between me and that. It's easy for me to turn a blind eye to it, which is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. I remember I was reading a Shane Claiborne book like years ago, and there was a lot to learn from it, a lot to disagree with for sure, but like a lot to learn from, because he was talking about when it comes to like poverty, it's not so much that we don't care about those in poverty, it's that we don't see them. A lot of that is willful. There's like intentional distance, but when we're confronted with it, oftentimes our hearts can't help but hurt. And so that's really what I want. Like when you walk down one of these streets, like what do you see? What did you see? What do you experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And we were talking about this earlier, but in all of my trips to Thailand, every year I see something that I wish I could unsee. And so a lot of these memories are permanently burned into my brain. So yeah, walking down a street in Bangkok, you know, you hear all the car sounds, honking horns, smell all the smells of street food and burning trash and fish sauce, and approaching a red light district, there's a lot of lights, a lot of blaring pop music. Most of it we play here in the States, which is something interesting once you come home and you hear that same song on the radio. And women lined up outside of these establishments in minimal clothing. Some bars will make the women dress in like lingerie. Some of them will actually make them dress in schoolgirl outfits.
Stage outfits.
Yeah, so like a sexy Catholic girl outfit, which is really interesting to see the men that choose the women that are dressed like young girls over the women that are dressed like women. But all of them are wearing a little number on their bra or any other piece of clothing, and they're known by that number instead of their name. And the other thing that you see, it just like smacks you in the face, is the number of white people that are on the street, that are in the bars, that are talking to these women, I have seen men hand money over to the women like they're some sort of like they're a piece of meat, you know, that they're just buying on a stall in the street. And they're American, they're European. I've also, something else that I think totally shocked me my first year were the number of couples that I saw participating in this. Man and wife or girlfriend and boyfriend participating. And yeah, it just like, even today, like I can't wrap my mind around it.
Is there some kind of like age restriction? Also, we talked a lot about women, but like guys, boys, like those.
Yeah, so the bars are not supposed to employ any girl, I think under 18. But there have been a few times where I've seen a Thai girl and there's no way that she's 18 or older. Specifically last year, I saw that in Pattaya. Pattaya is way worse than Bangkok is when it comes to red light districts in the sex industry. It's just a lot darker. It's a lot more evil. And so I saw in quite a few bars underage girls. And I know for a fact that you can find boys and men for sale as well. I have not seen that myself, but I know, around any dark corner. If you ask the right person, if you want to buy it, you will find it.
Yeah. That's helpful. Heartbreaking, but really clear. And you hear a lot of stories about how, you hear stories. It's just stories for you, but like stories about like white businessmen who will stop off in Thailand on their way to wherever to do business, or people will intentionally make that a vacation spot because they'll say like the beaches are beautiful, but all the while they're just consuming other human beings. They're going there to purchase people.
I think the thing which I heard all those same stories and, thought the same thing before I went to Thailand the first time. But I think the thing that really struck me that first trip and like continues to strike me every year I go is the amount of young men that are there. Young men that look just like you, that are not, like if they came back to America, they could get any girl that they wanted, but they chose to fly to Thailand and they chose to buy someone. It's just like a level of anger that I don't experience a lot until I get there. Yeah, that's super beat up. I remember even hearing Russell Brand. He was shared a story about how when he's turned 18, his dad took him to Thailand and like bought him sex, and that was his coming of age, becoming a man story. That like blew my mind. Russell Brand goes so far as to say that the crux of all his problems, because he was a pretty severe drug addict, but he'd say the crux of all his problems was with pornography. Like it started with pornography, and his dad bought him this prostitute, and it just started to erode his moral compass and his value of life and what it meant to dignify people and to actually listen to them and see them as valuable. So when you talk about young men, that comes to mind, and that helps level the playing field a little bit, because even then we can just be like, oh, dirty old men. Right. But you're actually saying like, no, there are guys who like could hook up with people back home, but they choose to go buy someone. Yeah. Right? There's that forbidden fruit that we're so attracted to, which reminds me of the girls in Catholic skirts. You know, like there's a forbiddenness to it, like an allure, and unfortunately it sells. Yeah. Super jacked up. Okay. It was a heavy conversation. So this is cool. All right, some good news. So I know that Thailand recently banned Pornhub, and they banned 180 other porn sites. And like people have been freaking out. People in Thailand have not been happy. Do you know anything about that? We've talked on this podcast numerous times about the connection between pornography and sex trafficking. So I assume that's a good thing. What do you know about that, and what are some of the repercussions there? Yeah, I am not super familiar with the issue of porn in Thailand. The extent of my knowledge with that is when COVID happened, the beginning of this year, 2020, we started getting reports from our partner there, Beginnings Foundation, that the bars in the red light districts were closing, which on one hand we rejoiced because we knew that thousands of women were not being bought and sold every night. But then on the other hand, we realized the gravity of that situation and that those women therefore aren't making an income anymore. So what were they going to do? Right. And so as our partner was telling us all of this, one of the things that they brought up was that many women were turning to different online avenues to advertise themselves, to videos, different things like that. I would assume that a lot of those women turned to different porn sites to make money. But prior to that, I hadn't really gotten much knowledge of what the issue of porn was in Thailand. No, that's really helpful. When it comes to, again, sex trafficking, even now we're talking about it in like some distant land. And so there's still the possibility for our moral awareness to create distance from that responsibility. It comes a little bit closer when it's attached to pornography, because pornography is nearly ubiquitous here in America and all over the West.
It's just almost like assumed that people watch porn. So that brings it closer, knowing that like if anybody has watched pornography with any frequency, then they have, whether they've known it or not, viewed somebody who's being trafficked and exploited. Like that's just statistically the fact of the matter. Like it's all over the place, and a lot of it's made to look tame, made to look like it's authentic porn. But those women and some of those men are being trafficked and they're being exploited. So that brings it closer. But like, is there any like sex trafficking that takes place in North America or here in the West that would help? Well, that would help us to appreciate, to be able to see it a little bit better.
Yeah, 100%. The International Labor Organization estimates that there's 2 million trafficking victims in North America and South America. So that includes both labor and sex trafficking. So it is 100% happening here in America. It's happening here in Virginia, even in Lynchburg. It just looks totally different than it does in India or Thailand or Cambodia. What is really different about trafficking here in the States that I think a lot of people don't understand. I think when people think about trafficking in the States, they think about kidnapping or, stranger danger or something like that. But what we see more frequently here, actually, the top 2 trafficker types in the United States are family and intimate partners or boyfriends or spouses. It's not a stranger. It's someone that you know, that you think that you can trust or that you think that you love. Actually, our partner in West Virginia, Zara House, they're only 2.5-3 hours from Lynchburg. The biggest problem that they're experiencing there are families selling their children for drug money. And we see the same thing here in Central Virginia as well. There's actually a local gang here in the Lynchburg, Central Virginia area that has been known to use underage gang members to recruit young girls or other minors, and those individuals would be pimped out after school and then would return home like nothing happened. That's here in Lynchburg. We know of that. So yeah, it 100% happens here in this area. It's just so hidden, and we don't know exactly what to look for. We're thinking about red light districts. We're thinking about the movie Taken. We're thinking about all these other things, and it doesn't look like that.
No, that is really helpful. So listen to the rest of the story. I picked up a prostitute once. It was on accident. I was picking up a hitchhiker.
I was like, where's this story going?
This just got real. Yeah. No. I often will pick up like hitchhikers or people on the side of the street. I'll just pull over, see if they need a ride. And I did that, and she got in the car, and I asked her, it was so wild to see the language. Miss was like, do you need a ride? And then she was just like, of course I do. And then she got in, and I was just like, well, where are you looking to go? And she's like, wherever you want to take me. And like, we just kept on missing each other with the language. And it took me a while to realize that all of it was just sexual innuendo. That's what she was hearing. And for me, I was just being I was like, well, where are you trying to go? And then she realized that I wasn't trying to give her a ride. And she just got livid. She started screaming at me, and she just got out of the car. And I was just like parked there for like 10 minutes, just kind of dumbfounded and shocked, because I was like, I'd never experienced anything like that. Like I thought I was just doing like a nice thing. And it's a common practice. This is a few years ago, and she was just livid and reamed me out, presumably because she could have gotten in quite a bit of trouble with whoever was handling her. But we also had Lexi Smith. Like Lexi was... She came on this podcast, and she was in Chicago, and she was sex trafficked as a little girl, and she, same thing, like she'd go home afterwards, but somebody had like literally like brainwashed her, and was just like using her and selling her body and different people. It's just awful, awful, awful. So I appreciate you helping to bring it home a bit. That's really quite helpful. And as is the case, whenever it's whenever I see a problem that's bigger than me, whenever I see a problem that's bigger than my capabilities, my capacity to engage it, my financial resources, I ignore it. So when it comes to this issue, what does it look like for people to actually be proactive and fight back? Like, how can people engage this in a real way?
Yeah, I think the first step in fighting trafficking is being educated. Educate yourself, learn what trafficking is and what it's not, what it looks like here, what it doesn't look like, different signs and things you can look out for. And then use that knowledge to educate others and make others aware. I think one of our biggest tools that we often, minimize or diminish is our voice. We're living in a world where we have the world at our hands. We have social media. We can reach billions of people. Use that to share about trafficking, to share about organizations like Freedom 424, Proven Ministries, et cetera, and don't discount what your voice can do. That's how I first learned about human trafficking. Was one of my friends came back from winter break at college and was sharing videos of the Passion Conference. And it was in that moment that I knew I had to do something about this. And then I think something else is, of course, financially giving. We can't do our work without money. It takes money to fight money. Trafficking is $150 billion a year industry, and we have to have money to fight that, as non-glamorous as that sounds. Volunteer, intern, use your time and your skills to help other organizations. Go on trips with Freedom 424. There's a lot of ways. Use whatever you're good at, whatever your skills are. Use those things to fight human trafficking and make a difference.
That's really helpful. I know even something as simple as wearing a shirt. People will ask about the shirt, or people, they at least pay attention because usually there's some kind of message on it. Right. So wearing a shirt with a message along those lines can even go a long way in the education piece that you're talking about and spreading awareness. It's either assumed that it doesn't exist or that it's not such a big problem. It's not such a big issue. It's almost like a part of the sexual revolution where people can use their bodies however they want, and they don't realize the kind of trauma that's happening to these individuals and the real exploitation that's taking place. Yeah, that brings up a really good point in that I think it's 1 out of 4 victims of trafficking have been sexually abused or molested since childhood. So actually not victims of trafficking, prostitutes. So women who we would see on the street and think, oh, they chose that life. They are doing that because they want to. When in reality, they were abused and molested as a child, and their brains are patterned into thinking that way of life is normal, and it's not. So don't judge a book by its cover. That's really helpful, Emily. And to your point, because I want to plug you guys a little bit, if there's anywhere to give, this is a good place to give. Even if it's a $5, you choose not to get coffee one morning, right? And you give this direction, that's when your money is actually doing good, and it's actually saving lives and protecting people. So I would encourage anyone listening to definitely check that out. Their links will be in the show notes for Freedom 424. So please check that out. The last question is, it's always two-pronged. So one, how can people get plugged in with what you do? And how can people be praying? How can people either pray for you or pray for what you're doing? Yeah, so we are active on social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook. We also have a website, freedom424.org, and we have a ton of information on there with different events that we have coming up, volunteer opportunities, intern opportunities,
fundraising, you name it, it's on there. We also, and I'll plug this, well, two things actually. One, we have a parent education series with information on how parents can talk to their kids about pornography and exploitation and how to have safe and healthy relationships, both online and offline.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
awesome.
that's on our website. And we also have a podcast as well, Compel Podcast. And for prayer, I would just say, 2020 was a really hard year. Thankfully, it wasn't just hard for us. It was hard for everyone else.
Yeah.
Maybe not thankfully, but at least, we're not the only ones.
Yeah.
But just prayers that, our team can get through the rest of this year and well, that we can meet our goals. And then just planning for 2021 and, a year that is so very unknown still, how we can effectively do our work under all the different restrictions and guidelines and things like that. Yeah.
Emily, thanks for being on.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate having you. Guys, thank you for joining us. It has been one of the harder podcasts, at least for me. And this brings us close to home. It's important to see the repercussions of free and unadulterated love when our only moral ethic is consent. Like we just assume that as long as there's consent and it's not hurting anybody, then it's okay. But when we take something sacred and we just assume that it doesn't have any value, there are repercussions for it. Like abuse and exploitation are ubiquitous, and hookup culture isn't without fallout. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If this has encouraged you, would you share it with somebody that you think would find value from it? And we will catch all of you next time. Thank you for joining us.